The hum of the fluorescent lights was almost hypnotic, like watching a flickering screen, waiting for a jump scare. The aroma of burnt coffee permeated the air, a constant in this dull office routine. Another Tuesday, another tasteless sandwich from the canteen. This was my life, predictable, bland, except for the thoughts. The thoughts were far from bland. They were vivid, graphic, terrifyingly exciting. As I unwrapped my sandwich, I pictured the cashier, a plump woman with tired eyes, sprawled on the floor, a single red line drawn across her throat. A quick, clean kill, no struggle, no mess, efficient. The thought sent a thrill through me, a jolt of adrenaline in the monotony of my day. I quickly glanced around, making sure no one noticed the fleeting darkness that had just crossed my mind. Everyone seemed oblivious, engrossed in their own mundane lunches, their own boring lives. I smiled to myself. They had no idea who they were sitting next to. They had no idea what I was capable of. My days were a carefully constructed facade. Wake up, go for a run, meticulously prepare a healthy breakfast, head to work. The perfect picture of a responsible, health-conscious young professional. No one suspected a thing. Why would they? I was quiet, polite, even a little boring. The perfect camouflage. The thoughts, however, simmered beneath the surface. They were always there, lurking in the shadows of my mind. The news reports of unsolved murders, the true crime documentaries I devoured, they all fueled the fire. I studied the patterns, the mistakes, the telltale signs. I learned from the failures of others, honing my own imaginary scenarios. It was a game, a twisted game that only I knew I was playing. A game of control, of power. The power to decide who lived and who died. A power that, for now, remained safely locked away in my mind. The city was my hunting ground. Every face in the crowd, every stranger on the street, became a potential player in my game. I observed them, analysed their weaknesses, their routines. The elderly woman walking her dog, the businessman engrossed in his phone, the young couple holding hands. All so vulnerable, so oblivious. Their lives seemed so fragile, so easily disrupted. The thought of causing that disruption, of ending their existence with a single, decisive act, filled me with a strange sense of power. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being on the edge, of holding a dark secret that no one else knew. But I was in control. I knew the line between fantasy and reality. For now, it was just a game, a mental exercise, a way to relieve the boredom, the frustration of my mundane life. But the line was getting thinner, the fantasies more vivid, the urge harder to ignore. The urge was like a physical itch, a nagging pressure that built up inside me. It started as a whisper, then grew into a roar, a primal instinct, a bloodlust that demanded to be satisfied. It was during those moments when the urge was strongest that I had to fight the hardest to maintain control. I would find myself drawn to dark places, deserted alleyways, abandoned buildings, places where I could let the darkness inside me breathe, where I could indulge in the fantasies, visualize the scenarios, feel the power coursing through my veins. It was a dangerous game I was playing, a tightrope walk between sanity and madness. One wrong step, one moment of weakness, and I could lose myself completely. But the thrill of the edge, the intoxicating feeling of being in control, kept me coming back for more. Control. It was the one word that defined my existence. Control over my thoughts, my actions, my emotions. Control over the darkness that threatened to consume me. I had built my life on a foundation of control, a carefully constructed facade of normalcy that hid the chaos within. Every aspect of my life was meticulously planned, from my diet and exercise routine to my social interactions. I avoided anything that could trigger the darkness, anything that could jeopardize the fragile balance I had created. I became a master of self-discipline, a fortress of willpower against the rising tide of my own desires. But the control was an illusion, a fragile facade that could crumble at any moment. The darkness was always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to break free. And with each passing day, the line between control and chaos became thinner, the struggle more intense. She was a quiet creature, the librarian, a woman of routine, predictable as the sunrise. Every Tuesday afternoon, she walked the same route, stopping at the same coffee shop, her bag slung over her shoulder, filled with books and dreams. I knew her schedule, her habits, her vulnerabilities. I found myself drawn to her, not in a romantic sense, but in a predatory one. She was the perfect target, the perfect embodiment of the weakness I craved to exploit. The thought of ending her life, of snuffing out her quiet existence, filled me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. But I held back. I reminded myself it was just a game, a mental exercise. I had rules, boundaries I wouldn't cross. Not yet. But the librarian, with her predictable routine and her quiet vulnerability, became a constant presence in my thoughts, a symbol of the darkness that was slowly consuming me. The city at night was a different beast altogether. The neon lights painted the streets in hues of vice, the shadows concealing secrets and desires. The air hummed with a restless energy, a collective exhalation of anxieties and frustrations. It was in this urban jungle that I felt most alive, most in tune with the darkness that dwelled within me. I would drive for hours, aimlessly cruising through the labyrinthine streets, observing the nocturnal creatures that emerged under the cover of darkness. The prostitutes on street corners, the drug dealers lurking in alleyways, the homeless huddled under bridges, they were all reflections of the darkness I carried within myself. It was during these drives that the urge was strongest, the fantasies most vivid. The city became my hunting ground, its inhabitants my prey. I imagined myself stalking them, selecting my victims, executing my plans with precision and detachment. But the morning light would always bring me back to reality, to the carefully constructed facade of normalcy I'd created. It started with a simple note. A scrap of paper tucked into the librarian's bag, just a few words, seemingly harmless. I'm watching you. Nothing threatening, nothing overtly menacing, just a subtle suggestion, a seed of fear planted in her mind. I watched her from a distance, observing her reaction. The flicker of fear in her eyes when she discovered the note, the way she clutched her bag tighter, her head swiveling nervously as she scanned the street. It was exhilarating, this ability to manipulate her emotions, to instill fear with such a simple act. The note was just the beginning, a test of my own boundaries, a way to gauge my level of control. It was a game, a twisted game that only I knew I was playing. But the game was escalating, the stakes getting higher, the line between fantasy and reality blurring with every passing day. The world seemed to be filled with sheep, blindly following the herd, oblivious to the wolves lurking in the shadows. They were content in their routines, their predictable lives, their manufactured happiness. They were easy prey, ripe for the picking. I, on the other hand, was awake. I saw the world for what it truly was, a cruel and chaotic place where only the strong survived. I had shed the illusion of morality, the shackles of societal expectations. I was free, unburdened by the constraints of empathy or compassion. I was a predator in a world of prey, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I was tired of hiding. The darkness was rising within me, demanding to be released. The urge to act, to make my mark on the world, was growing stronger with each passing day. The future was a blank canvas, a landscape of possibilities waiting to be explored. The city, my hunting ground, stretched out before me, teeming with potential victims, each one a story waiting to be ended. The librarian, with her predictable routine and her quiet vulnerability, was just the beginning. The darkness had taken root, spreading its tendrils through my mind, poisoning my thoughts, fueling my desires. I was no longer content with simply observing, with fantasizing. The urge to act, to make my mark on the world, was overwhelming. The game had changed. The rules were being rewritten, and I was ready to play.